If you enjoy these conversations with Doug Casey, I highly encourage you to take a moment and sign up for our free email newsletter at dougcasey.substack.com. As you probably are aware, we've had a couple strikes on YouTube, and it's only a matter of time before you'll be unable to find us there, and who knows where else. So join the email list. Make sure you stay in touch. Enjoy today's episode. All right. Good morning, Doug. We're back with some viewer questions, but I have to ask, did you have anything interesting in the Encyclopedia Britannica today?
Oh, God damn it. I've been so busy this morning. I haven't opened my email to see what the Britannica has in store for us. So maybe the next time we do this, I'll bring us up to date on today and whatever the next day we do this is.
There's probably some really important celebrity birthdays we're missing because you've been so busy.
I'm sure.
Okay, well, let's get into some of these questions then. The first question is, people ask you this related question all the time, which, how bad do you think things will get? But this file member asks specifically, rather than you answer that question, to imagine how Harry Brown might answer that question. Harry Brown was is it fair to say he was a mentor to you and an old friend of yours? And he had a pretty optimistic view of the world, it seems. At least that's what I get from reading his work. So how do you think he would answer that question?
Yeah, I really miss Harry because he really was a genius. He was actually a stand-up comedian, although we never acted as such. It was very funny. And and the thing with Harry is that he had a lot of wisdom. He really did. And he was very intellectually honest, which is another thing. He didn't try to bullshit anybody, frankly, and he wouldn't put up with that. So Harry was great. Uh, Speaking for myself, of course, first, people ask me, well, how bad do you think it's going to get? Well, I've always said, I think it's going to be so bad that it's going to be worse than even I think it's going to be. And of course, we can go into the possibilities of, you know, a new dark age of historical proportions and all this type of thing. But what would Harry say? Uh, as Harry got older, he became more conservative. In other words, the last book that he wrote that I know of, he wanted to write a book on opera, which he was very interested in, but he never got around to doing it. Uh, the last book I think he wrote was called Why Government Doesn't Work. And Harry was an anarchist. And it's funny, as he got older, to answer the question here, what would Harry say? Uh, he used to not believe in marriage, and he changed his opinion as he got older. And he used to, and he's philosophically an ANCAP, no question about it. But that said, he ran for president on the Libertarian ticket for two
Mm.
goes. And, what would he do if he was elected president? Well, he'd do a lot of things like granting clemency to hundreds, probably thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people in the federal prison system that were there for nonviolent, non-crimes, things like that. But uh, would he do what Javier Milei says he's going to do in Argentina when he wins the election this Sunday? Well, I presume he's going to win. No, Harry was a gradualist on that. So, he became more mellow as he got older. So, with that background, how do I answer the question? I mean, what would Harry do now? What would Harry think now?
What would he? How bad do you think would think it's going to get?
Hmm. This was the nice thing about talking with Harry. You could go on and it would be a real conversation. It wouldn't be like listening to a lecture. What would Harry think now? I think Harry's of the opinion that we'd probably muddle through. And when you get right down to it, I wouldn't disagree with that, if only because having the low opinion I do of humans, They're like cockroaches, and they survive almost anything.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. But
I
what
think
would
he'd be cautiously optimistic. Uh, I would tend to be cautiously pessimistic.
me too. Okay. Next question is, was the so-called Hamas surprise attack on Israel to get people away from Russia, from thinking about Russia winning in Ukraine?
I don't think it had anything to do with that. Uh, I'm not sure why Hamas decided to launch this attack just now. It seems to me like the whole thing is probably overrated. I mean, yeah, they killed 1,000 or so people. Okay, that's nasty. And I'm asking myself why on that border, which is supposedly the most closely monitored and rationally defended in the world. How did this happen? How did that? It's crazy. It's almost like it was an inside job. Uh, you know, I don't understand that. I'd like an explanation of exactly how the IDF and the Mossad and all these people that are supposedly the best professionals in the world, how did they screw this up? There's something really wrong with that. Uh, is it an existential threat to Israel, which everybody's saying? I don't see how. I mean, uh, they can't launch an invasion of Israel from there. Well, okay, maybe it's going to ramp up to something in the north where Hezbollah does have a large private army, and yeah, all kinds of things can happen. But uh, I don't see why anybody should be running around with their hair on fire just because of this. And the big mistake, as far as I'm concerned, this ought to be treated like a crime.
Mhm.
A crime. In other words, it ought to be like that that Olympic thing in Munich where all the Israeli wrestlers were killed. Okay, it's like that times 100. So you find out who's responsible for it, and you bring them to justice. But you can't justify even if all those 2 million people in Gaza hate Israelis for whatever reasons, and they probably do for whatever reasons. That's no excuse to go in there and kill them all because that's that's just asking for trouble. So it's got to be treated as a crime, which is the way 911 should have been treated as a crime,
Yeah,
not with an invasion of a whole country. It's insane.
it is. I mean, I think the only way it becomes an existential threat to Israel is if they overreact in their response to it and induce, a larger response because of it.
Yeah, exactly. Among other, sure, because the Israelis have nuclear bombs. This is well known. Yeah, it has been the fact 30 years at least. But I'm uh, I'm I've been informed that from people that know that the Iranians also have nuclear bombs. And frankly, anybody can have nuclear bombs today. If the North Koreans can develop them, one of the most backward countries in the world, anybody can have them. In fact, an acquaintance of mine many years ago, and this was in the 70s, his name was, oh God, he went by the moniker of Filthy Pierre, but his name was, he was a Jewish physicist. And of course, all physicists are Jewish. But he wrote a book called Basement Nukes, where he discussed how any upper middle class American family could develop their own nuclear device. And this is way back when. So,
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, I mean, whether he was stretching the possibilities or not, I don't know. But hey, that was 50 years ago.
Holy cow. Okay. Uh, Next question is, where have you found the best place to do business without being molested by the state?
I think you've got to go to a third world country where you're a foreigner, basically, and they don't really care about you as long as you get involved. Don't get involved in local politics, which you won't do because you're probably going to have a language problem to start with and a cultural problem. So, and they don't care about you. I mean, this implies, of course, that you've got some money and your welcome is, you know, a wealthy foreigner who doesn't get involved but spends money and employs people, and they'll leave you alone. And you can pick from a wide range of countries, including unlikely countries. But you've got to have what's the business you're going to set up? Okay. I mean, I can imagine going to Mauritania, of all places, and if you have enough money, living very happily there. But what are you going to do? I mean, frankly,
Yeah.
um, what's your? I mean, yeah, you can do stuff online. Okay, that's fine. But what else are you going to do?
Yeah. That's the question. That's the question. Okay. All right. Next question here is the breaking point seems to be closer. Does Doug expect a big drop in gold price as a result of the liquidity issues that will arise before moving much higher from there?
No, I don't expect a big drop in gold prices. I mean, anything can happen. And as I've been saying for years, gold is reasonably priced, it seems to me, relative to everything else in the world, relative to houses and labor and food and all this type of thing. It's not cheap, it's not dear. But with the state of the world and the way things are evolving, it's going higher. So do I expect a big drop? Well, not really, because central banks, they say, and I believe it, have been buying gold through selling gold. The average person is getting a little bit scared. And no, I'm not looking forward to a big drop in gold. I'm looking for it to go higher. And hopefully, these crappy little mining stocks will follow it up on steroids, which they're supposed to have done, but they haven't so far. In
I
fact,
saw,
even today as we talk, gold is what? I looked at it, was 2010 or something like $2,010 or something like that this morning when I looked. And have the mining stocks moved? Not at all. So
and well, and certainly people don't care yet about gold at all. I saw a recent Mark Dice video, which I know you like him, where he was standing in some street corner offering people $10 or a maple leaf, a 1 ounce
if
gold coin. And of course, all of them choose the $10. They're like, well, what would I even do with the gold? So yeah, I mean, I could still spend the $10 right now. Of course, he's standing right outside of a gold shop.
it's amazing. And in the past, he did Silver Bar or Hershey Bar.
Yeah.
Same thing. These idiots chose the Hershey Bar. So yeah,
Not the top, that's for sure.
not the top. No, it's not the top.
Okay. Next question. This guy says he's relocating from Germany to Thailand and he moved 80% of his assets to Switzerland, uh, 20% to interactive brokers in Ireland. Do you have any comment on those choices?
I think they're good choices. I presume he's an American. And of course, that's the problem. If you still carry a US citizenship, US passport, you're still in the net of the empire at that point. But I think Thailand is a good choice. As just like I was saying before, Thailand is a country. It's politically unstable and goofy with the generals, but they all love their king. That's one thing the Thais, they absolutely respect and love their king for whatever reasons. And the local politics won't bother you. As a foreigner, it's a great country, high standard of living for a foreigner. It's great. So Thailand's a great choice. They're uninvolved, they're neutral, and Ireland is a good place to have your interactive broker's account. Okay, these are all good choices, it seems to me he's made.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is what's going wrong in the world has been discussed many times. Can you, Doug, give a few white pills, like positive things about the next few years? Maybe some white pills, as opposed to black pills here, that are not seen by many people.
Hmm. Um, well, I'd go back to the two things which are in back of all progress. And I don't think I'm missing anything here. Number one, the average person is like a squirrel. We're genetically wired to produce more than we consume and save the difference because genetically we know that winter's coming. So you got to set something aside. Yes, most people don't do that today. They've been corrupted by all kinds of stupid ideas, but still, the average person does tend to produce more than he consume, everything else being equal. And that builds capital, that builds wealth. And the second thing is technological progress, financed by that capital, uh, is compounding upon itself. And I can give you reasons why that'll end, but it's been the trend for thousands of years, accelerating in the last few centuries. So, yeah, it should be a story with a happy ending. I mean, maybe we'll go through a dark age of a couple hundred years, but still, you got to look at how long you want to take the trend from. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Have you ever hunted or fished? And do you have any stories about that?
Well, never hunted big game, uh, but I've always been a gun guy. I mean, I always loved guns. And when we were kids, when kids could just go out shooting randomly at anything, that's not really hunting, quite frankly. Uh, but you know what? I don't like the idea of hunting anymore just because, yes, I'm a meat eater, but I don't particularly like the idea of killing anything. And even though I still love guns, although mostly pistols as opposed to rifles, to tell you the truth. I'm a basically a pistol guy because I don't want to get into a situation where you have to use a rifle to start with, although I know how to, obviously. So, uh, fishing, yeah, I've been fishing, deep sea fishing and stream fishing, and actually a reasonable amount of fishing ever since I was a kid. But I don't even like fishing. I feel bad for the damn fish, believe it or not. I
That's for
really
sure.
do. And yes, I like to eat fish, but still, I'm just telling you, the creature that you haul out of the lake or the ocean, I feel bad for him. So I don't want to personally be involved with it. Is that dishonest? Yeah, maybe. And the last time I went hunting was I went hunting in Cordoba, Argentina, for birds. It was a 4-day bird hunting expedition with some with a, about 10 maniacal Kiwis who were who were shotgun bird hunting maniacs. And I mean, I shot, what do we did ducks one morning, and then we did grouse another morning, and then we did pigeons, and it was really mass murder of birds on both. And I engaged in it because the farmers that when we went out, what were those little damn birds that we were shooting mostly? Uh, you know, the farmer said, "We got to get rid of these damn birds because they're they destroy the crop, and they will come back bigger, bigger flocks next year unless we wipe them out." So I said, "Okay, I'll just pretend I'm skeet shooting." And I felt bad for the little birds too. So I shot like 500 shells, which is a lot of 12 gauge shell. That's nothing. The maniacal Kiwis were shooting 1,000 shells, you know.
Wow. Well, Argentina has legendary bird hunting. Like
It's
it's,
done. But
yeah.
so if you like, but I kind of got that out of my system. So I don't really want to kill anything at this point. Although I say that with the caveat that there are some two-legged creatures that really do need killing, but I don't want to personally be involved.
Yeah. Okay. Um, in the US, what income producing assets would one procure and when? Specifically when they're going to be more fairly valued.
Well, um, yeah, we talk about these things in our file thing. So I don't want to name any names because touting stocks where people don't research them or know the reasons is a bad idea from many points of view. But if you want to know, you want to own income producing stocks in areas that everybody hates, but where there's really sound fundamental reasons why they're good things to own. Now, what does that mean? Right now, you can get high dividend yields, up to 20%, I've got to say, in three areas: coal stocks, natural gas stocks, and oil stocks. The 20% is in coal stocks because everybody hates coal.
Mm.
And I don't want to go into all the reasons, but look in those three areas and don't just look in the US.
Okay. We've got some specific in the file for members who are pro or VIP. They'll get access to this. Okay. Next question is, will Milei win the election in Argentina this weekend? And if so, what immediate changes should we expect?
Well, as it turns out, just this very morning, I got a call from a friend of mine. Happens to be he's an American Argentine at this point. Uh, he's lived down there for many years. So oddly, I got a call for an unrelated reason just this morning. And so I asked him about that. And he thinks, boots on the ground, that Malay is going to win. But maybe, I mean, as flaky as the Argentine voter is, maybe Sergio Massa, who's a Kirchnerite, but just
And he's the economic minister right now, right?
res- yeah, most directly responsible for their current runaway inflation. He says, yeah, he could win because they have the machine and they have the unions and they're telling all kinds of lies to the people and doing all kinds of things that, you know, it's possible that these descamisados, as they used to call them, the shirtless ones, they could could vote for Massa or maybe Patricia Bullrich, who's kind of a middle of the road and wouldn't be so bad. Not so bad is not good enough to straighten things. So the answer to the question is, I'll put my money on Millet, and then we'll see what happens. But it's going to be really interesting to watch because Millet is, I'm convinced, is really going to try to overturn the apple carts and break the rice bowls of lots of groups down there, and it's going to be wild. I
Could
hope
be
they don't
wild.
kill him. I hope
Yeah.
I hope they don't kill him.
Hope they don't kill. I hope he wins. I hope they don't kill him. And I hope he's able to get the things done he wants to get done. But if he is, which will be a medium and long term, you got to imagine what even the positive changes he would make would immediately cause more chaos in the near term, right?
No question about it. But in the long term, and I'm so buried in Argentine real estate at this point. I mean, got tens of thousands of acres of land in Argentina, which is, thinking about it, is kind of insane, kind of funny. I mean, you can own that much land in a country like that. Uh, I think it'll be a story with a happy ending, or maybe not. You know,
It'll be interesting to watch regardless.
oh, it'll be fantastic to watch.
Okay, Doug, what was one of your big breaks?
I made my own break, um, in that after I lost a lot of money in an ill-starred business, where I first started to figure out that as much as I appreciate business, I'm not a business guy. Not interested in it, not good at it. Business. It doesn't mean that I can't make judgments and spectate on business, but running the business is not, have no interest in it. I'm not good at it. Okay. So after I lose a huge amount of money when I'm about 30 and I'm way in back of the eight ball, I thought to myself, what is my strong suit? You want to play to your strong suit. And I started writing The International Man. Oh, because I'd already done a lot of travel, done a lot of thinking, and I like to comment on it. And that kind of was my big break, writing a book in a niche that people had no information about international stuff really back then. So that was my big break. And then I wrote my economics book, Crisis Investing, and that was my second big break. And the rest is kind of history. Those are my big breaks. And of course, I've had a couple of lucky strikes when it comes to the stock market and things like that. So,
Yeah, I think you framed those two that right because you have there's you can get some lucky strikes in life, but the big breaks are ones that you create for yourself.
yeah, they really are. So you got to figure out what can you do better than most, or hopefully almost anybody else. And then you got to work. And we
Okay.
were talking earlier about how it may be harder today than it used to be. Because as you pointed out, a young guy today has to deal with debt, which I never had to deal with. And he's got to deal with, like, what did you say? If a young guy doesn't get health insurance, he's got to pay $150 a month in tax to the government for,
Essentially the equivalent. Yeah, the equivalent of what it was health insurance would be. Yep.
and these societies much more tightly regulated now than it was in the past. And so I think it's a tougher road to hoe than it used to be.
Yeah, I think you have to go out if you're especially if you're trying to follow the path that is well traveled. It's very, very difficult. Going to college, getting a degree, especially if it's not in the hard sciences or something, and then starting in a career. The cost burden that one faces out of the gate is just so high. It's very difficult for them to reach escape velocity and start to have some freedom.
Yeah. And you got to watch what you say today in a way that you did not in the past. It's true. I mean, it's unbelievable that you do, but I think you do.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I mean, that's why I've never had a steady job. Or, I mean, the only jobs I've ever had were working in a scrap yard, which was interesting, and working in a foundry shoveling sand, and working for American Cyanamid moving barrels. And those were the only real jobs that I've ever had. Well, that's not quite true. I mean, I've had some other jobs in college, and everybody's been a waiter, a busboy in the past, but no, I'm a hardcore unemployable.
Yeah. Well, honestly, when you're unemployable, you get more creative. Because I'm a college dropout, and so and I think that's proved to be a big advantage for me because nobody would hire me because as a college dropout, at least during that time period, uh, no one would hire me for something that I'd be willing to work for. The amount of money that I was worth in the normal market as a non college graduate. So I had to create my own stuff
Yeah.
instead.
In fact, like I said, I don't want to be in business and have to supervise people. But if anybody wanted to come to work for me and they had a graduate degree, I wouldn't go, oh, that's great. I'd say, how do you rationalize having spent all that extra time and money with
Poor judgment.
poor
Poor
judgment?
judgment.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Let's see. Next question. How do you keep a balanced and detached worldview and plan strategically during these troubled times?
Mhm. Well, I think this is a book that I've been trying to rope you into writing with me for years. And I think you're probably coming around now.
We're making
Fine.
progress.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, what a young man should do in order to have things and in order to be something. It's three important verbs. And so that's what you've got to do. I think you first have got to become as close to being a polymath as you can. And what does that mean? It means absorbing a lot of information in a lot of different areas, which means reading a lot of books and book equivalents. So that's number one. Then you got to go out and do stuff. And that's what the book is about. Oh, I don't know. In general, I just say keep your pecker hard and your powder dry, and the world will turn.
Love that quote. You use that a lot. What's somebody asked about your thoughts on citizenship or second passport in by investment in El Salvador. I think the program is not finalized yet, but theoretically, you'd be able to exchange Bitcoin for economic citizenship in El Salvador. What do you think about
Mm.
that as an opportunity?
Not the best passport in the world. Not the worst either. Uh, yeah, I think it's probably a good idea. I mean, I certainly hope that Bukele makes it. I mean, he's locked up. Pretty amazing that in a country like that, he's locked up 60,000 hardcore criminals or presumably hardcore criminals, and he's changed a lot of things. And so, okay, could be worse. Or you can get a citizenship from these other countries that peddle them
Yeah.
for $100 to $150,000.
Yeah. Like Dominica, for instance, right?
Yeah, good idea. So it's a good idea.
What are your thoughts on Paraguay, which he says seems like a cheap man's Uruguay, kind of an Oldsmobile to the Cadillac of Uruguay? What do you think about Paraguay?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's a good analogy because I don't think it's cheap man's Uruguay. The the names of the countries may sound the same, but they're really different from each other. If they're really different, even though they're like next door. Uh, and I'm a fan of Paraguay. I mean, it's not as exotic as it used to be. It used to be when I first went to Paraguay, it was exotic. I mean, it really was. I mean, there was still Nazis running around and stressing around the place, and I mean, I liked it. It was wild and crazy, and now it's normalized, but it's not like Uruguay, but it is a lot cheaper.
A lot cheaper. Okay. Are you familiar with the book from 1935 called Sex and Culture by Yusuf Unwin?
No, should I research that? He says, I mean, it should.
Yeah. Yeah, he says it's worth a read, but he doesn't offer any details about it. I hadn't heard of it.
So many books to read, and 1.5 million. That's an accurate number, I think. New ones published every year. So how do you choose?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. It seems to me that most of the world's production, innovation, entrepreneurship, and best services come from the first world still, despite all its faults. Since they're importing third worlders with hardly any skills or less cognitive capacity by the thousands daily, where, if anywhere, is going to remain a sophisticated country?
Hmm. Well, I question whether it's going to be the US. I mean, you know, where they're actively encouraging, it appears, millions of third worlders that don't seem to have any redeeming virtues. I mean, they're young, unmarried males coming into the country. And is it true that a lot of them are being given free cell phones, free debit cards?
I've seen at least one case for sure where, or at least on video, I don't know if you can really believe it, where the person shows that they have a UNESCO debit card.
Hmm. Well, doesn't augur well, but so where will Western civilization will be maintained in some aspects, some places, but I'm afraid the US is in for some really tough times, especially, a- and I'm willing to make a bet that the Democrats are going to win in 24. That's the way I see it. I hope I'm wrong, but so it's not going to be good here in the US. Uh, Poland and Hungary are very culturally conservative, and it appears like a number of their political types are watching what's happening, and they don't want it to happen to them. But they're both part of the EU, so maybe they'll get out of the EU because the EU is going to fall apart. And is Russia? Oh, you know, where to go? Where to go?
It's
Hmm.
hard to know where to go, but he does say, he says most of the world's production, innovation, entrepreneurship, and best services come from the first world. I mean, if he's, I don't know, I assume he's probably excluding China from that, but I mean, clearly most of the production in the world actually comes from China. And, innovation is starting to happen there. I mean, they replaced a lot of the chips. They were forced out. Huawei was forced to essentially build some of their own chips. So I don't know. There's a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship there still.
Yeah, of course, most of our listeners are not of Chinese background and descent, and even if they are, they don't speak Chinese. Uh, so if you're a Guaylo in China, which can be translated as a foreign devil, uh, you're not going to speak the language. You don't look Chinese. Uh, yeah, you can get by all right if you can bring something to the party, but you know,
It would
it's a
be an
big club.
outsider.
It's a big club. You ain't ever going to be in it.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, we have one file member who's an American from the Midwest who moved there, I think about 15 years ago initially, and learned Chinese. Has a couple of businesses there and loves it. He's there now. He loves it there. So
Yeah, I can see that. I don't, oh, I could do that. I could do that myself and get by just fine. Having lived in Hong Kong for years, I thought it was just fine and dandy. But
yeah, okay. Next question: have you heard of a proposed quote American village in Russia, which would allow Westerners to love Russia?
I've heard that the Russians have encouraged Afrikaners to move there, uh, and it makes sense. Uh, but for an American to go to Russia now with the political situation such as it is, I mean, you're going to get a big fat file with the FBI and I don't know how many other agencies. So it's no reason not to do it. But
Well, and also just if the U.S. continues to foment war with Russia, then you have to imagine that the Russian people are not going to be as welcoming of Americans as they may have been in the past.
yeah, that's right. I mean, look what Americans did to people of Japanese descent before World War II, and for that matter, German descent, where they were lighting dachshunds on fire and things like that because they're German dogs, and then the stupid chimpanzees uh, were trying to replace French fries with freedom fries
Yes.
because why? Because the French were didn't want to invade Iraq. I mean, this is so
Exactly.
yeah. I'm afraid people basically act like chimpanzees. So you got to be careful about that.
Okay. Do you remember this gold heist in Canada about 6 months ago? It was one of the largest in history. Somehow, Air Canada, I believe, and it was transporting stuff, and somebody got away with apparently like $20 million worth of gold, and that's fallen off. We never really found out what happened with it or anything. Why do you? The question is, why haven't there been more discussions about that heist?
Yeah, I vaguely remember it happening, and then the news cycle drove on. So I presume the owner of that gold or the insurer of that gold is hunting for the miscreants at this point.
So I looked it up, and I saw that Brinks was suing Air Canada over it because apparently it was, Brinks was transporting it, but they, handed it off to Air Canada for the actual shipment, and then that's where it was lost. So I think Brinks is suing them, but that's all I know.
But who actually heisted it? Is the
Yeah,
question. And are they going to find those warm bodies that did it?
I don't know. It seems like a good. It seems like they got away with it. Seems like they got away.
Yeah, I guess that stuff happens.
So let's see. Just a couple more questions. This guy says on Cyprus, there's a city with 40,000 Russians and Ukrainians. He says mainly they're there to avoid recruitment. How come these countries leave their most productive people? How come they let their most productive people pass the border? Is one question. And then will that stay the pattern in a theoretical Arab plus friends against Jewish plus friends war, allowing people to leave?
Hmm. Yeah, Cyprus is an epicenter for Russians and I guess Ukrainians. I mean, lots and lots of them there. And this was the case long before this dust up in the Ukraine started. So I guess they get along fine there. I mean, I guess I was in Cyprus like 10 years ago and it seemed mellow enough to me. But
I think his question is, why do you think, now Ukraine is trying to repatriate some of their uh, military age people? They kind of let them escape the country early on. And I kind of, was asking why they would let that happen. And then do you think that if there is expansion of the war between the Arabs and the Jews, do you think that other countries are going to clamp down on freedom of movement to make sure they've got warm bodies to send to the trenches?
yeah, that's really disturbing. The fact that the Zelensky regime is approaching other governments and asking them to, send these guys back so they can go into the meat grinder. I mean, I certainly hope Zelensky is tried for all the crimes he's guilty of, and there are many, not least of which is bribery. I'm sure they say the Panama Papers revealed that even back then he was worth $500 million, which you don't get from acting, being a second-rate comic in a third world country. So, yeah, it's a real problem if you're closely identified with a group. It's like what we were talking about the other day. If you're Jewish, oh, I mean, you're a Jew, and other people have the. I mean, it can be a real problem. Just like if you're almost anything that is not popular in a
Mhm.
given place. So,
Yeah, it was Trump supporters, and at one point, and it'll move around.
and maybe it'll still be Trump's supporters if the Democrats are reelected. And of course, they got another 18 months to do all kinds of God knows what they're going to do.
Yeah, did you see they put that the guy in he's sentenced to 7 months in federal prison for creating memes back in the Hillary Trump election? Did you see that he had actually put away for that?
No, I haven't seen that. It's funny, right here on my desk, just by accident. I mean, it's here because I'm reading it. This book, Three Felonies a Day by Harvey Silverglate. And this book was written, I don't know, 15 years ago. And it's much, much more serious that he points out in this book. Everybody should read this. It's that we could easily be living in a police state here in the US soon. And they'll have lots of good reasons, supported by most of the chimpanzees in this country, as to why a police state's a good thing for national security, of course, and God knows what else. So,
Exactly. Well, and you got to imagine if this guy's question about military age people leaving borders. You got to imagine if war escalates, that the movement of both people and capital across international borders is going to be more and more restricted over time. You have to imagine that's true.
yeah, this is a good reason to get a residency and preferably a citizenship in a neutral, preferably small country where that's not really a consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Last question for today, Doug, is what do you think are the best countries to live in and around the Europe? Because he says South America is too far away for them. So, is there any place in Europe that you think would be a good spot to be for the coming difficulties?
Well, if South America is too far away, that also means that Southeast Asia and Australasia is too far away too. So where are you going to go? Um, is Dubai a possible answer?
That's a good point. I mean, that's in that region. So yeah, why not?
I mean, it's a very international place full of foreigners. If you've got money, a lot of this comes down to money. I mean, that'd be fine. And, if you want to live in that part of the world, I mean, uh, it's a language thing. I mean, look, if you went to Almaty, Kazakhstan, you think, now there's a really beautiful city, uh, kind of in the middle of nowhere. It used to be the capital of Kazakhstan before they built some ridiculous new city in the middle of the country. I mean, you could go there, you'd probably be okay. Yeah, but you got to speak Russian, and you know, the, so what language are you going to speak? This is a problem because most people, once they become, once they're adults, don't pick up languages the way they might when they were kids. So I don't know, where are you going to go? I
I mean,
think Dubai's not a bad answer, but but there are probably others. But Europe is not a good answer at this point, I don't think.
I remember something you said years ago, and I'm sure I'll get the quote wrong, but you say like the history of Europe is one giant blood stain or something like that. And just make it so if there's a World War III possibility and all the migration problems they have there, and the conflict in the EU and its member states, just seems like it's a dangerous place to spend time.
Yeah, between, mass migration from Africa and the Middle East, that's destabilizing. And the fact, you can look at the Balkans where these people have been killing each other for since day one, but Europe in general is not much different from the Balkans, just a little bit slower moving, than a little bit less. The French hate the Germans hate the Dutch, and I don't like anybody very much.
All right, good. Well, I think we'll leave it there, Doug. Thank you very much, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks, Matt. See you then.